Good evening, everybody, and good morning to the people from across the globe on behalf of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce. I welcome you all to this special session organized by the Cultural Heritage Committee of the PCC, a rendezvous with the writers. On behalf of Punjabi Chamber, I welcome our special invitees, the celebrated writer and anthropologist, freelance journalist, Mr. Haroon Khalid, who has written his book, Walking with Nanak, and which would be the topic of our discussions today, who shall be in conversation with another celebrated author and senior journalist, Mr. Roopinder Singh. I also welcome our Cultural Heritage Committee Chair, Mr. Roopinder Singh, who has curated this program, and I'm grateful to him for all the assistance always. He's a great personality. He's an author himself. He's a filmmaker. He has produced a number of documentaries and is working on two great masterpieces in documenting some of the heroics of Brigadier Roopinder Singh, which I think in PCC we shall have this opportunity of discussing sometimes later also. And he's the one who is working relentlessly to preserve our cultural heritage. He has founded the Sangrur Heritage Preservation Society and has been curating a number of festivals, cultural festivals, literary festivals in Sangrur, and has spearheaded many programs to preserve the architecture of Sangrur, which perhaps many of you who have visited must visit if you have not, because it's almost a replica in terms of architecture to Jaipur. I'm also grateful to the PCC Secretariat, especially our Executive Director, Dr. Rashid Datta, Administrator Jinayanath, and all the logistic experts who are assisting us in putting together this program. For those of you who have joined in here today, I shall very briefly introduce you to the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce. This is a platform of the people helping people. It is in the true Punjabi spirit, whether it's a business or any profession, that the Punjabis are there to assist any entrepreneur, any business, any budding entrepreneur to set up their business or to network with Punjabis anywhere around the globe. It was founded in the USA and today has chapters across various countries, and 17 chapters we have now and is growing in a very fast pace. Chandigarh chapter was formed last year, and since then it's making headway in diverse areas. Punjabi Chamber's philanthropic arm, the Punjabi Chamber Foundation, I would like also to tell you that it's doing a great job, and during the pandemic has donated 100 oxygen concentrators in Punjab. It has also raised 100 crores through generous donations by Punjabis from across the globe, and are setting up 2 oxygen plants in collaboration with Rotary International, one in Manali and another one in Jalandhar. The Cultural Heritage Committee has been established to connect Punjabis across the globe to their roots. And today, in one of its initiatives, we have 3 great souls in this discussion. Of course, Mr. Roopinder Singh is one, Mr. Haroon Khalid, and Mr. Roopinder Singh. So over to you, Roopinder Singh ji, to take this program forward. Over to you, sir. Ji, you have to unmute yourself. And I can tell all those people in the audience, they can put their questions in the chat box or in the Q&A window, which is there on your Zoom link. So that we can take it up once the discussion is over. And I think this will be taken forward by Roopinder Singh ji. So may I request Roopinder ji to please take over. Karanveer ji.
Yes. Firstly, we'd like to welcome all the people who have joined in this wonderful initiative of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce and an initiative of Sangrur Heritage Preservation Society. So it's a great moment to try to increase our reach of work and reach out to the diaspora and to people all across the globe. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Mr. Haroon Khalid, a renowned writer and author. A brief introduction on him actually would not do justice, but I still have to connect the audience with the main panel today. Haroon Khalid has an academic background in anthropology. He got his undergraduate degrees from Lahore University of Management Sciences in social sciences with a focus in anthropology and history, and graduate anthropology from the University of Toronto. He has traveled extensively around Pakistan and has written about minority rights, folk traditions, politicalization of history and heritage, nationalism and identity, and several other topics. Haroon is the author of 4 books: A White Trail in 2013, In Search of Shiva 2015, Walking with Nanak 2016, and Imagining Lahore 2018. Our moderator for the day is Mr. Roopinder Singh, who actually needs no introduction. He is an author and a senior journalist. Roopinder ji is an author and a journalist who was senior associate editor with the Tribune, an institution he served for 3 decades. Before joining the Tribune, he was assistant editor, India Observer, New York, USA, a student of philosophy. He earned his BA Honours Philosophy and MA degrees from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. He has many books to his credit: Sikh Heritage, Ethos and Relics, Delhi 84, Guru Nanak, His Life and Teachings, and Arjun Singh, DFC, Marshal of the Indian Air Force. We have, in fact, while going through the book of Haroon, he has been greatly inspired by Nanak Padshah's his life, his journey, his travels, his being a poet, and so many other facets of his life. And what really actually gripped him was the Babarnama, actually, where Nanak Sahib, after Babur actually invades India, and as a very strong message from Guru Sahib, in fact, what he writes is, Khurasan khasmana kiya, Hindustan daraya, ape dos na dei karta, jamkar Mughal chadaya, eti maar pai karlane, taaki dard na aya, karte tu sabna ka soi. And keeping in the same spirit, in fact, Dasme Padshah, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, in his Zafarnama in 1705, again talks, when he sends his the Zafarnama letter to Aurangzeb, in that also he sends a very strong message to the emperor of that time. So, in fact, in which he mentions na sazo, na bazo, na fauzo, na farsh, but still the spirit of Chardi Kala and the spirit which was indomitable, and it was a hallmark, and something that we are so proud about. So when we talk about Nanak Sahib's journey, Rabab to bagair bhi kade mukammal nahi hundi hai. So we are going to introduce a youngster who has dedicated himself to the art of learning Rabab, and he is very dedicated to his subject. The young boy's name is Gurdeep, and you will be hearing a very small recital for 1 minute. Before then, we move on to this very interesting and superb session that has been planned for you. So let's all get on with the wonderful work at hand, and all the best, and we hope you enjoy this program. Over to you.
Over to Roopinder ji.
Roopinder ji, you are on mute.
Please unmute them.
Roopinder ji, you are on mute.
Probably he is not able to unmute his video and audio. Can
Yeah,
you
he's
help,
there. He's there.
Gina?
Yeah,
He's there.
All right. Okay.
my apologies. Slight glitch. Anyway, Haroon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Hello.
Sat Sri Akal. Assalamu alaikum. Lovely to talk to you finally. I've been reading your book. This is the second time I've read it, and I must say, the second time was better than the first one. One enjoyed it a bit more.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to hear that coming from you.
When we look at it, the first obvious question that comes to mind is, what prompted to write Walking with Nanak? What made you do that?
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. And thank you, Punjabi Chamber, for having me. Thank you, Haroon Singh ji, for arranging this. It's such a wonderful opportunity for me to talk to everyone. So that's a question that I think about a lot. And that's a question that I'm also asked a lot. And I think the answer for me has actually changed over the years. So why I wrote the book, let's say 5-6 years ago, was different from how I see now why I wrote the book. And I think like, so for a very simple answer would be that I really wanted to understand the philosophy of Guru Nanak. I really wanted to understand who Guru Nanak was, what his main message was. And I also wanted to understand how his message then becomes institutionalized Sikhism, how his message traveled from one guru to the other. So what was his whole history? Because what I really realized at that point was that there is such an important part of Sikh history and Guru Nanak's history in Pakistan. And it is all around us. You will be driving around Lahore, you'll be driving around anywhere in Punjab, and you will see an old Gurdwara, or you will see some spot that has been mentioned in Guru Nanak's Bani or some other historical text. But there is so less discourse on Guru Nanak. And I'm talking about pre-Kartarpur. Kartarpur se pehle to nobody was even talking about Guru Nanak in a Pakistani context. So I think for me, the curiosity was that how can we talk about Punjab without talking about Guru Nanak? And I think for me, that was perhaps the greatest motivation.
In your book, you say that you found Guru Nanak fascinating. You start off with that concept. So what was it that you found so fascinating about it?
Yeah,
right in the first flush.
Yeah, I think so. I was lucky where I went to Nankana Sahib. This was very early, right after I graduated. So I went to one of the pilgrimages, And then I had the opportunity to go to Nankana Sahib a couple of times because it was at that point the largest Sikh festival, and I think still is in Pakistan. And being at Nankana Sahib was actually a very spiritual experience for me. So the idea was that I almost felt like I could see Guru Nanak. I could see Guru Nanak walking those streets. I could see him walking with Mardana. And it was just a very surreal. It was a very spiritual experience. So that was one part. Like, I mean, there was history right in front of me of Guru Nanak. And then, of course, Guru Nanak himself, because he's such an interesting figure where we're in Pakistan. So what I would say is that there is not a complete lack of knowledge about Guru Nanak, but there was some mention, I mean, you know, Iqbal, for example, talks about Guru Nanak. So there is some discourse on Guru Nanak. Sometimes you will hear these weird blogs that say that Guru Nanak was a Muslim, whatever. But the whole idea is that there is this need to reclaim Guru Nanak within Pakistan and within the Muslim ethos. So there is this, I think that there's a whole cultural fascination with Guru Nanak as well. And I think his emphasis, perhaps one analysis that I would have is that his emphasis on monotheism or monoism, however we want to understand it, is sort of something that really aligns with many people's understanding of religion. But I think that was the fascination, that the idea that there is so much geography, historical geography, that is located around Pakistan that I was witnessing. And I had to understand the symbolic, the historical, the religious significance of those places, of those sites.
Now, you know, you say that I wasn't interested in Nanak the saint, but in Nanak the son, Nanak the father, Nanak the philosopher, Nanak the poet, Nanak the wanderer. So obviously your perspective is very different from that of a believer who's primarily focused on the spiritual aspects of his teachings. In your quest, how do these various facets of Guru Nanak manifest themselves?
So it's a tough one. It's a tough question, but you're right, and I think that's always been. I mean, sorry, I'm just sort of trying to figure out.
Yeah,
I think for me, so one biggest sort of disservice that we do to our historical figures, and I think that we do to our religious figures, and that's not true. That's true for all religions. I think one big disservice that we do is we sometimes dehumanize them, and that I feel is very, very problematic, because the more human they are, the more relatable they are. I want to understand, for example, what were some of their struggles. How did they overcome those struggles? And how do those struggles then reflect in my life? If somebody is born with divinity, and that's true for all religions. If somebody is born with divinity, then I cannot draw inspiration from that person. But if somebody who's human, who had the same insecurities, vulnerabilities that all other human beings have, and they found a way to overcome that, I think that for me is essentially the main question that I approach a lot of my historical projects with. So that was, I guess that's perhaps one way of putting it. Okay. And I think for me, then sort of, I think what also helped me really was that I am not born into Sikhism. So let's say if I was born into Sikhism, then perhaps I would have not been able to approach this topic from this point of view. I think I had that privilege where I was, well, firstly, not born into Sikhism, and also being in Pakistan. Frankly, if I was in India, I would perhaps been a little more scared of doing the book. But I think because being away from that culture, from that ethos in many ways, also provided me that space to be a little more creative in what I wanted to do.
How has the book been received within Pakistan?
I mean, I'm actually, like, I think the book's done so well. I was surprised by how well the book did, and I think I still feel surprised every day how well the book's been received by the Sikh community. And I say that over and over again, and I really mean it when I generally say it. I think it really shows that how intellectually vibrant the Sikh community is compared to many other communities and many other religions. Like the fact that I'm being a Pakistani Muslim writing about Guru Nanak in a non-conventional way, and the book is being received so well. I think that itself for me is just something I can't get over, and it really reflects so well on the Sikh community more so than me. But within Pakistan as well, I think the book's done pretty well. I think because it's done well in India and it's done well with the Sikh community, so it's also done well in Pakistan. But interestingly, so I wrote the book. The book came out in 2016. And the Kartarpur corridor, I think, opened in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or yeah, around those. So you could see that there was a growing interest in Sikh history. So in many ways, my work is also a product of that larger environment that is in Pakistan. And I feel like my book really sort of came at a time when Pakistan was more open to talking about Sikh history, non-Muslim history. So it's done well in that case.
Great, great. Now, you've used historical fiction as a kind of a medium. How would you call it? You would call it faction, historical fiction. What would you call your technique?
I think so. It's a bit of experimental. I mean, I think if anything, I don't know. Like I don't know how many, because I'm not really a student of literature, so I don't know the technical terminology. But if anything, perhaps we can define it as postmodern, in the sense that it is historical fiction, it is it is travel log. It also uses poetry, and then it uses some part of magical realism when we're talking about the stories of miracles. So I think there's emergence of these multiple genres that go into it. So there's no one genre, but I think largely what I was thinking of is travel log, because till Walking with Nanak, and I think even with Imagining Lahore, I have written travel log. That was my sort of focus. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to write a travel log which is, well, not boring in that sense, in terms of trying to move away from a conventional understanding of travel log. And I wanted to incorporate a bit of fiction, a bit of non-fiction, a bit of poetry. So it's this emergence of two, and it's multiple genres sort of interacting with each other.
Now, for the travelogue, you've of course gone back on your previous work where you have been writing travelogues over for various media on various issues, right?
Yes.
But your academic focus was on anthropology. So how did a academician then get into something like this?
Yeah, I think one, and that's sort of my larger disagreement with academia in a way. And I think there is some conversation that is happening now within academia as well, is that there needs to be more outreach of academia. I feel like academia at many levels tends to be very insular. It ends up being it ends up writing in a language. It ends up also speaking to only people that other academics can make sense. I think they do such incredible work. There's such incredible work being done in all different academic departments, and there needs to be more outreach. Like, people need to know these amazing discourses that are happening. Academics need to play a role in shaping discourse in the broader society. I mean, more than ever, India, Pakistan now needs some good historians to tell us, well, how we're politicizing history is problematic. But academics, so I feel like a lot of academic training is in a way which makes it very jargonic, which makes it very difficult for lay people to understand. I think that's one reason. That's something I wanted to move away from right from the start. That I wanted to do serious, good research, which is credible academically, but able to present that research to a layperson, so that everybody is able to read. But of course, having said that, I think my definition of layperson is people who can read English, and people who are privileged in a certain way. Obviously, that those limitations remain. But the idea still was that at least there is more outreach than just within those academic quarters.
Now you are based in Canada. Are you based in Canada?
Yes.
Are you connected to academia? Because I look at it, and these are two very different models we have. What we study here is a part of our British heritage, which is very different from the way the Americans and the Canadians are, and they connect much better. Do you feel that?
I mean, I'm actually not. Yeah. So I'm actually not in academia. So I was recently in grad school. But I thought about going back and do my PhD, but I don't know. I think for me, academic work, I mean, I have all the respect for it.
Right.
But it's something that I felt like I was not in a position to engage.
Okay. Now, one of the things you've done is you've taken oral history and used it quite effectively. And one of your comments in that was that, we tend to be dismissive about it, and that's more of a construct of these very rigid kind of historical models, which talk about written history and so on and so forth. I found that very interesting because, frankly, in our part of the world, that's what we have. We have our oral histories, and that's what our history is based on. I think you've done that well. And in that, of course, you largely picked up both the Janam Sakhis and the local lore. Yet there were times when there was a conflict between the two. So tell us how you navigated that.
Yeah, so I mean, so one interest of mine has always been is to not just talk about Gurdwaras or talk about Guru Nanak's history in a in just in that context, but also talk about what those Gurdwaras and what that history means in Pakistan today. So, for example, if you see a Gurdwara in Lahore, for example, which is a Muslim-dominated city, how do people see that Gurdwara? And what are their stories about Guru Nanak? How do they understand Guru Nanak? And I think that's so. In that context, some very interesting stories came. I met some people, and of course, I was very familiar with many of the stories that they were telling me, but I still wanted to know from their point of view how aware are they of Guru Nanak? Because for me, it was not authenticity. So they could even have wrong history in that sense, but how they talked about Guru Nanak was something that I wanted to know. Like, because in that language is hidden their sort of response of how they see Guru Nanak. And those are some of the things I wanted to know. And some really interesting things came up. As you mentioned, there was a Gurdwara, Sacha Khand, which is a very popular Gurdwara, which has now become a Muslim mazar. And I was talking to people who were sitting there, and they told me the story of Sacha Khand, and they were mixing up a few stories. But that was not important. What was important was that how they were talking about Guru Nanak and how they were referring to him as a saint or as a person of God. And that really tells us how deeply rooted this religiosity is, this respect for Guru Nanak is in the folk Islamic tradition, as I say it.
You pay rich tributes to Iqbal Qasir. Tell us a bit more about him.
Right. So Iqbal Qasir is my mentor. So he's my guru. And I met him when I was in university. And he had done extensive work on Sikh heritage in Pakistan. He has an incredible book called Historical Sikh Shrines of Pakistan. And what is also really interesting is that, so today you will have many people who've worked on Sikh Gurdwaras, including myself. But Iqbal Qasir was doing this in the 90s, in the late 90s, or in the early 2000s, when the Pakistani state was not very open to you working on Sikh Gurdwaras. And he worked on those Gurdwaras without any privilege, without card, just sort of doing his job and then doing all those things and finding all those traces. And then his book essentially became this primary source for all the other future works on Sikh Gurdwaras that happen in Pakistan. And I found that absolutely incredible, because for me, reading history is not just about reading history, but also going through those spaces. So I'm very interested in geographies. What do those historical places mean in Pakistan today? How are those places being treated? How are those places being seen? And Iqbal Qasir was somebody who could help me who could help me sort of walk through those spaces, because unfortunately, because of the colonized colonial education system, it is very divorced from our geography, from our local history. So there's almost a revolutionary need to align our education with our local histories and geographies.
Right. When you're talking about Guru Nanak, you say that his entire life was a struggle to dilute the differences between Islam and Hinduism. I found the expression dilute the differences very interesting. Given everything that's taking place now, how do we carry on diluting such differences?
Yeah, I think in many ways you're absolutely right. In many ways we are much more divided and much more distinct as communities than at the time of Guru Nanak, right? So, for example, Guru Nanak's one of his most sort of loyal devotee was Bhai Mardana, and Bhai Mardana referred to himself as a Sikh of Guru Nanak, and he remained a Muslim. He never converted. So, in many ways, he was a Muslim and a Sikh at the same time, and that was the nature of religiosity for many people. And I think in many ways, the British colonial state, because of its institutionalization of census reports and other things, changed the way we understand religion, made identities more distinct. Then, of course, partition really also aggravated, in many ways, our understanding of what it means to be Muslim, what it means to be Sikh, what it means to be Hindu. So there is, of course, much more need to go back to history. And I think so that's, in fact, one reason why I go back to history. So that's one reason why I'm exploring Guru Nanak, and now I'm working on Waris Shah, for example, because we have models from our past which are inclusive, which bring these communities together. And they can, so we are not even, one criticism that, for example, is laid against secular people in Pakistan, at least, is that they are westernized. And I'm like, well, actually, that's not true. Like, if you look at traditional Punjabi literature, it's actually much more revolutionary than many of the texts today. For example, what Bulleh Shah says today, what Bulleh Shah said in 1800s is something you can't say today in Pakistan. Maybe not even in India. So they are very, you have, from our history, you have these amazing examples. And there's a need to understand. There's a need to understand where these people are coming from and what are they referring to, and use that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've sort of taken away the fluidity of identity that we had and pigeonholed ourselves into these really tiny cubby holes. Whoever created them, today they are in our minds. We have to acknowledge that. Only by acknowledging it can we sort of, go
Absolutely.
further about breaking them down.
Yes.
Now, when you're talking of the Sadpur episode and you're talking of Bhai Mardana, you say search for honesty in this dishonest world is what the quest was at that point. Yes, I totally agree with that. Unfortunately, that quest remains around us even today. But that experience must have been phenomenal for you, going there, talking to people, trying to recreate that. Share a bit about that.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely. I think I've only had these moments twice in my life where I go to a place, a particular historical place, and I feel like I'm actually talking to that person whose place this is, right? So, and one is Guru Nanak, of course, and the other is Bhagat Singh. Like when I went to his village, whenever I go to any place that is associated with him, I feel like he's there right with me. And I think of this as a very spiritual experience, and I don't think I have that with any other historical character in that sense. But also in many ways, what I'm also very aware of is that my understanding of Guru Nanak, for example, is a product of my contemporary understanding of religion, history. So I'm very aware of that. So for example, if I'm writing a historical fiction on Guru Nanak, I'm not claiming this to be exactly how Guru Nanak was. What I'm really telling you is that this is how I perceive Guru Nanak. And I think I've tried to say that in the book as well, where you will also be able to see those parallels where I have a particular experience and I write that in my non-fiction, and then I use that experience to make a fictional story of how this must have been. So I'm making those direct. So I'm acknowledging that idea that how I understand today, how I understand Guru Nanak is a product of how I am understanding myself, and it is really my image. And I think that's probably true for many people. Like we understand the world through our own lens. We understand history, we understand religion through our own lens, and we even understand divinity through our own lens. Unfortunately, that's just not acknowledged enough. The search for objectivity.
In the book that you say, my interpretation of Nanak is also a reflection of my own self. That's as clear as you can be on that issue, and very much so. But any particular part of the book you want to stress on, any unusual experiences that you would like to share with us while writing?
Yeah, I think a couple of really interesting. So, for example, the book starts from Shahkot, which is a Muslim shrine. And the reason why I mentioned Shahkot, because there's a very popular story at Shahkot that Guru Nanak's mother used to come to this particular shrine and she prayed, and the Sufi saint then prayed for her, and that's how they had their first baby right. Nanki. And of course, that story doesn't have to be true. Like, I'm not in search if that story is true, but what I find fascinating is that today in Pakistan, once again, a Muslim-dominated country, hardly any Sikhs. You have a Muslim Sufi shrine that claims the legacy of Guru Nanak. I think that itself is such a beautiful story. Why are they still associating with Guru Nanak despite so many years of partition, despite so many years of propaganda? I think that was a very interesting moment for me, and I found those moments over and over again at different small shrines. For example, I went to Baby Nanki's Janamsthan in Lahore, and there the Ganti told me, I didn't meet them directly, but the Ganti told me that how there's a Sufi shrine next to the Gurdwara, and they also claim that Guru Nanak came to that place and he probably gave them some gift, and the descendants have still kept those gifts. Similarly, I mentioned the story of Sacha Khand, where the people talk about Guru Nanak with full reverence. That was a beautiful story. So I think these small little stories of how in many of these small circles, small groups, you will find this love and this reverence for Guru Nanak. Even Kartarpur, before it was big, before it was renovated, it was only the local Muslim devotees of Guru Nanak who used to come to Kartarpur and pay homage to him. So for them, he was like a Sufi saint, like any other Sufi saint. And that itself was, for me, that is a beautiful story.
True. The journey begins. I love this passage. I'm going to read it out and then take it from there. When talking of Nanak's eye fell on the worn-out clothes of the carpenter. His shirt was tattered and patched with mismatched cloth. The turban on his head was soiled. He wore no shoes. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Nanak looked past him into his house and saw there was no window. The emptiness in his house stood out in the darkness that surrounded it. The carpenter was holding a hammer in his hand and was older than Nanak. The mustache was untrimmed. The way you build up the character, you can actually picture the whole thing so beautifully that I just had to read it out to admire it for you. I mean, this is beautifully done.
Thank you so much. Means a lot.
Then I was looking at this. Your chapter on 2 paisas worth of truth. The devotees of the shrine had a strange relationship with the building. On the one hand, they were subconsciously carrying forward the tradition of Guru Nanak, giving it contemporary interpretation because of changing political conditions. On the other hand, they were determined to completely erase the legacy of this place. I want you to talk a little more about this.
Yeah. No, so one thing that's happened today in India, Pakistan, and I think that's so what the popular discourse is that when a Gurdwara becomes a Sufi shrine, and I've written about this in many of my articles, a lot of response that I feel people see it through the lens of Islam taking over the space of another religion. Islam conquering another religion in that sense. And I feel like that's a very problematic framework to look at, because on the ground, that's not how people see it. And I think so there's actually a reason why a Sufi shrine will emerge at a Gurdwara. And that's because for the people, that space, because it was a Gurdwara, is sacred. So the reason why they make a Sufi shrine there is not to show that Islam is better than Sikhism in that sense, but to somehow claim that sacredness of that space. So you will see many Gurdwaras across Pakistan that have become shrines. You will see many temples that have become shrines. And because I have worked in those spaces, that's my understanding, that they don't see it as a conquering space. They see it as a space where they are retaining, or where they are trying to claim the sacredness of that space. So in that way, I feel like they are carrying forward the legacy of Guru Nanak, or whoever that space claims to be from. But the other problem is that there is, of course, 70 years of propaganda or less in that sense, but there is a propaganda against multiple religions. Like our education system is biased in Pakistan. It is not like we don't really talk about other religions at all. Kids are not taught about other religions. Whenever other religions are mentioned, especially Hinduism, it is looked down upon. And I feel like so many people, of course, retain those biases. So they have this sort of very complicated relationship with the history. Whereas on one hand, through folk memory or through folk history, those places become sacred. But then through institutional history, those places are places that are hated. So that's a very complicated sort of past, I feel like.
Yeah. Now, yet, there is a continuity which has to be appreciated. I mean, eventually, I think that spiritual connect is there, and it is what is keeping people connected to the space, even if the expression of it changes over time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, there are times when you've been to these institutions in various places and you've seen how exploitative the local people who were handling religious affairs there had become, and so on and so forth. And at times you've been very, very angry about it in your book. Would you like to sort of talk about that a bit also?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Usually when we talk about Sufi Islam, and today after like 9/11, the whole narrative around Sufi Islam is that it is tolerant and it is this and that, and which is true. Like, well, firstly, there is no one Sufism. There's multiple shades of Sufism. So one Sufism can be very mainstream, and the other is, well, very different kind of Sufism. But we also have to understand that the Sufi shrines are not just about the Sufi saints. Like Bulleh Shah's shrine, like Bulleh Shah might stand for something and he represents something, or Shah Hussain represents something. But their shrine today don't necessarily represent the same thing as what they represent. So the shrine today have become institutions. They become feudal institutions. And there's exploitation. Like so we can't sort of talk about Sufism or Sufi shrines in that romance. There is a romance to it. There is a continuation of history and tradition, which I find fascinating and beautiful. But I also cannot over-romanticize and be like, well, these are great spaces and we should preserve them. They are exploitative in many ways. They are commercialized. And there's the feudal nature, there's a violence, there's a political violence that comes with that kind of power. And we have to talk about all those things while we're talking about the romantic sides of Sufi shrines.
Right. Now, when you started your book, you had a certain picture of Guru Nanak in your mind. As you progressed, did the picture evolve? What was the picture when you started, and where did your journey with Nanak take you?
So also a tough question. Thank you for asking that. I think as I discovered more of Guru Nanak, I think I realized maybe he was more revolutionary than I thought he was. In terms of his poetry, in terms of how he criticized institutional religion, in terms of how he mocks this concept of miracles, in terms of how critical he is of class, of politics, of economics, of these identities. I had an idea that perhaps this is where he'll be, but I feel like, I think he was much, much more revolutionary and critical of many of these things that we see today than I thought he would be, especially institutional religion. I feel like he was very critical of institutional religion. I feel like he was very critical of feudal culture, of violence, of gender violence, class-based violence. And I think that for me was sort of eye-opening in many ways.
I think that is absolutely true. And, again, there is this sort of construct of Guru Nanak as a very mild, kind of a soft person. And then you have Babar Bani, which of course influenced you tremendously, as one can see from the book. And you see him as a very, very angry person who's not at all happy with the way things are in the world and wants to hold people, even God, responsible for it.
Yeah,
absolutely, you're right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Karanjit ji, how are we doing on time? Do we?
Perfectly. I think in case any of the panelists or Karanveer Sivia has got any questions, he can go ahead. And but Haroon, I would like to know that writing about the heritage, the cultural heritage, how important in today's time is for the people to really understand it and appreciate it, so that these old relics, the richness can be preserved, or those values can be transferred to the next generation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's very, very important to preserve this history. And I think one problem that I have with, for example, Kartarpur corridor, and I think it's a brilliant initiative. But one problem that I had was that the narrative in Pakistan, which even came from the top, was that this is Sikh heritage, and we are doing it for our Sikh brothers and sisters. And that's not how I see Sikh history. I mean, I see it as my history. I see it as Punjab's history, and I think we need to, and that's essentially one model, one framework of how we need to look at our past. And I think also it's not just about preserving history, right? I mean, it's all preserving buildings. I think we can do a great job in preserving buildings, but what do those buildings represent? So, for example, Bulleh Shah Shrine today, or Shah Hussain, I keep on coming back. Like, their shrines are very well preserved, but their teachings are not, and their philosophies are not, and they're not well understood. In fact, their shrines become that same space where the kind of exploitation they criticize happens, and that's problematic. So we need to think of heritage beyond tangible, and even talk about intangible, which I feel like with South Asia, we might even be talking about much more richer heritage than tangible heritage.
I think your point is absolutely well taken, because it is the intangible that's far more difficult to come to terms with, to realize, and it changes in a very insidious way at times. So you really have to focus on the origins and focus on the real meaning of what the person actually stood for, and then stand for it. And in any situation over a period of time, institutions tend to corrupt the original message and sort of taint it with the perceptions of whoever is running them at that point, and also the socio-political situation at that time. I think
Absolutely.
It's a very valid point you've made.
Thank you. I just want to point out my battery is sort of ending. So,
right.
But I think it will 5-10 minutes. It will work. I hope so. But if
I
I disappear in the middle, so it's because
okay. I have one question for you, Haroon. I have a question for you.
Right.
What do you think in these old historical sites, and the history being put into the right perspective is showcased in a more healthier fashion? Would it also help with the interest of the people, and would it also generate flow of tourism, and a lot more people would be more willing to come and visit these shrines? It's like whenever we go to Ajmer Sharif, I mean, everybody does go down to the Ajmer Sharif shrines, or people like when they're visiting Amritsar. I mean, Golden Temple is almost like a must, that we do. Do you think if this becomes into an organized sector, would it really have a lot of takers, and would it definitely change the perspective of how people look at things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think right now there is a big, there has been a mushrooming of these private organizations that are organizing Sikh tours to many gurdwaras. So you can see that there is already a conversation that is happening about the potential of tourism. I mean, I think globally there's some research done on this, whereas the biggest form of tourism in the world is cultural. It is heritage, it is cultural. And I think art, cultural, and sports comes much later. So we can really see, I mean, why do people love going to Europe? Why do people love going to Paris? Because of the cultural heritage, the buildings, the shrines. Absolutely. I mean, when I came to Amritsar, absolutely, the first thing I wanted to see was was Golden Temple, and the second thing I wanted to see was Jallianwala Bagh. In Delhi, I wanted to see all the historical sites, Qutub Minar, etc., etc. So absolutely, I think that's there is no doubt that there is a huge economic advantage to be associated with these shrines.
One more small question, since we are at the subject. One is the Guru period that we are talking about, Guru Sahib's period and subsequent. One is Maharaja Ranjit Singh's period. Because of that, a lot of good heritage and buildings and monuments, plus forts had come up. Do you feel that if these are opened up to public and to international tourism, would that also generate a lot of interest in people?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, majority of the gurdwaras that exist in Pakistan today were constructed in Ranjit Singh's time. So they must have been smaller structures, but Ranjit Singh really made them into big shrines and spaces that they became. So they are. I mean, there's an overlap. I think And there is this acknowledgement. I think recently Pakistani state opened up they made a statue for Ranjit Singh and put it in Lahore Fort. And I think they've recently really understood the importance of Sikh heritage and trying to showcase. I mean, one reason why they're talking about it so much is the economic advantage. So you can see that they've really sort of taken that to what you're saying. Absolutely, that's exactly how they're thinking. This need to use Sikh heritage and history as an economic opportunity, and I think it's absolutely true.
Whenever we get to see Haroon Khalid in India and coming to visit and to come and spend some time with us in Chandigarh.
Yeah, I would love to. Hopefully, when things are better slightly in terms of COVID and also in terms of politics. I think the political situation is not very conducive for Pakistanis and Indians to travel to each other's country at this point. But hopefully, I hope things improve. I would love to. I've been to India 5-6 times, and I would love to be back there very soon.
Haroon, what is the next book you're working on?
I'm working on Varisha. So I'm working on and that's a complete fiction. So Varisha.
Right. Okay. Now there is one Roopinder Singh who writes that he bought your book in Lahore in 2017 at the readings. So it's a Roopinder Singh who has written it, and I think you got many readers and fans of yours writing here in India too.
Thank you for getting the book.
and there's another one. He writes, I also knew a person, an ex-pilot, who had a wish to run an airline between Nankana Sahib and Chandigarh. So there's a whole lot of a wish list, which is there. No, definitely. Definitely. But it's, one last question, Haroon. What exactly you understand what it means to be a Punjabi to you?
Yeah, no, it's actually a great question. I think that I've never really thought about it from that point of view. Like, on one hand, I'm very critical of these very nationalistic identities. I think they become problematic after a certain point. And I think for me, being Punjabi really means, firstly, respecting every other nationality and every other sort of so the pride that I take, for example, in being Punjabi, then I understand why everybody else would feel a certain sort of pride in their ethnicity, in their nationality, in their religion, and whatever way they want to define their nationality or their is. But I think Punjabi is almost, as I see it, I think it's almost revolutionary because there are symbols. I mean, of course, Punjabi, you can use any symbols. So my Punjabi symbols would be, for example, Guru Nanak, Baba Farid, Bulle Shah, Uddham Singh, Bhagat Singh. And these are as revolutionary figures as one can imagine them to be. But then, of course, you will find some people will define Punjabi in a very different way and will see other symbols who are, let's say, more conservative. So I think for me, in many ways, I think Uddham Singh really represented, and Varisha, I think for me, in many ways, represent how I want to understand Punjabi. Actually, they define for me what it means to be Punjabi.
That's excellent, Haroon. It's really been a great conversation and really very, very inspiring for all of us here. And we wish that we could continue. And I think we will have more opportunities to talk more about literature and other, interests which you have. And I'll quickly request Ojasvi, our co-chair in our Chandigarh chapter 2, please, express our gratitude to you. And that the best gift which we can give it to you is loads of love and affection, and for all the good work which you are doing, and the best wishes which we can send it to you.
Thank you so much.
And and Ojasvi, can you come online, please, and propose a formal vote of thanks, and thanks to our panelists, basically,
Thank you, Roopinder ji, for some wonderful questions.
My pleasure. Yes. It was lovely to interact with you.
I hope. Thank you. Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful as always.
Karanveer ji, and Ojasvi, please.
Ji, thank you, CJ ji. And on behalf of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, Chandigarh chapter, I would like to express our gratitude and thanks to Haroon Khalid, Karanveer sir, CJ Singh sir, and actually to all the guests also who have been able to join us for this wonderful tea. Always on behalf of PCC want to promote heritage culture and also see how we can promote a whole ecosystem of trade and commerce along with story building activities that we do.
Ojasvi, your
personally,
voice is lagging.
I have been making films for more than a decade now, and I've got chance to. Anji,
can you just switch off your video? Your voice is
give me a
lagging.
minute.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yes, better.
Yes, please.
Better, yes. So I was मैं दस रहा सीगा साਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ कि as a filmmaker myself, I have been thoroughly interested in filming Pakistan and also working on a lot of stories that preserve heritage and filmmaking that is beyond boundaries, cross-border filmmaking. And Guru Nanak's teachings have always inspired the whole Punjabi community, especially assets of Sikhism, and also people now who have adopted his teachings and followings across the globe. So rightfully, on behalf of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today and have been a part of this intriguing conversation hosted by, moderated by Roopinder Singh sir, and Haroon Khalid. Thank you for joining us from Toronto. So that will be it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I think I wish you all the best.
Thank you, all the best. That was wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you, everyone. I'm closing
Thank
the
you,
session
Genia.
for.
Please.
Yes, thank you, Genia and Rajeshri, for all the support which you have provided, for all the technical
Thank you so
support.
much,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm closing the session for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,